What is up, all you rock and roll rebels out there? It is time for the latest, the greatest episode of the Fortress of Rock, episode 189. Recording here on March the 28th, 2025. I, of course, am your humble, gracious, modest host, the Maestro, Kevin Crane, otherwise known as the Ayatollah of Rock and Rolla. You know how it works. 4 segments, about an hour and a half, discussing the music that you and I love beyond all belief. 70s, 80s, early 90s, classic rock. So let us get into it, shall we? Segment 1, as always, is News of the World, our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen. This is where we discuss what is going on currently in the world of rock and roll, pretty much the headlines from the past week. We'll start off with Kiss. I had my issues last week, as you know, if you listened to last week's episode, and why didn't you? If you didn't, get out there and listen to it. It's floating around out there in the internet. Go out and grab it, listen to it. Gene Simmons, of course, I've got issues with each and every day that passes. He turns out to be almost as big of a money grubber as Don Henley. I have no problem with the artists, with the performers making as much money as they can, except don't take advantage of the fans. That's where I draw the line. Negotiate the best deal you possibly can for yourself, for your bandmates, when it comes to the record labels, the promoters, the venues, but do not take advantage of the fans. Charge a fair price for everything you do for the fans. So, my problem with Gene Simmons, of course, was something shady going on behind the scenes with his solo tour. I will stick by my guns on that, as he, over the span of a month or so, expanded his solo tour, was offering this ridiculously overpriced roadie experience, and then all of a sudden he cancels almost 2/3 of his solo tour for no reason. Says he's healthy. Now we get news that Kiss will perform together again in a informal setting. There is a convention, a congregation going on November the 14th through November the 16th. Las Vegas, Nevada, the Virgin Hotel. The Kiss Army storms Vegas. 50th anniversary event. 50th anniversary of the formation of the Kiss Army, which I will say, without a doubt, to me, the greatest rock and roll fan club by far ever created. Was I ever a member? No. Sorry. Not going to give up more money than I already do buying all the CDs and the albums and the cassettes back in the day for a patch and maybe a quarterly or yearly skimpy newsletter. But the Kiss Army was, I will admit, the coolest group you could be in terms of the fans congregating, getting together. So I have to admit, this is a pretty cool event. 50th anniversary of the formation of the Kiss Army in Las Vegas. Kiss will be performing there. here's my issue, how it ties into the Gene Simmons thing. Because once again, I know that Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons are brilliant, brilliant businessmen. I do. They have rarely made a misstep all throughout the years. Going back to the early 70s all the way through to current day. There have been missteps, but they have been very, very smart, even brilliant in how they have responded, how they have... Corporate America could take lessons from Kiss. But, I'll say it again, they get a little greedy. And they tend to take advantage of their fans. And that, to me, again, is a big-time no-no. And I think they're doing it again here. First off, you have to have a VIP membership in the Kiss Army, which currently runs $50 a year to get the first access to these tickets for this Las Vegas event. Then, once you have already shelled out $50, you get the privilege of, at bare minimum, not counting hotel from what I've seen, not counting airfare, travel costs, food, all that stuff, bare minimum price to get in is $1,000. And then there are escalating packages that go all the way up to over $4,900. Really? Is it really going to be worth that? Think about how many mortgage payments you could make, utility bills you could pay. This again seems like Kiss going too far. Give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money. They love our money. They just love it, love it, love it. And like I said, closest comparison I can give you is Don Henley in the Eagles. Another great all-time classic rock band who tends to take advantage of their fans. But you can be the judge. If you think I'm overreacting, that's fine. I've been accused of that before. I'll be accused of it again. But I am fighting for the fans, the working class, middle class fans out there who want reasonable prices for these events, reasonable prices for merchandise, reasonable prices for concert tickets. Interesting as we segue from this unique live performance to our concert news this week. Foreigner, very interesting news over the last 7 days coming out about the recently inducted Rock and Roll Hall of Famers. And I still don't think we got a late breaking update on this just about an hour here before I got in front of the microphone. If you have not heard, and this does not impact the United States, but of course we are across the globe like any and every podcast is. So this will affect fans in other countries. Foreigner's 2025 shows in Canada and in Latin America will not feature current lead singer Kelly Hansen. And again, just like with Gene Simmons, there are no health issues involved here. The update I got today is that there are residency issues with Kelly Hansen, which is about as clear as mud. That doesn't tell us anything. Did Kelly Hansen commit a crime where he's not permitted to travel outside the United States? What is the deal? This is very, very odd to me. So you're going to get various people filling in, singing for Foreigner as they travel up to Canada and down into Latin America. The good news for those fans in Latin America is that Lou Gramm, it seems like they really have mended fences to some extent here. So Lou Gramm, he made this recent appearance in Florida with Kelly Hansen in the current lineup of Foreigner. And they're on their farewell tour. And this one's going to it looks like it's going to end up being about as long as Kiss's farewell tour was. But Lou Gramm will help to fill in on lead vocals on some of the Latin America dates. Just beware. If you're listening in Canada, you're not getting Lou Gramm, you're not getting Kelly Hansen. Supposedly the guy they got filling in is approved by Mick Jones. Okay. You know, how far can you push this? Honestly, how far can you push this? As long as Mick Jones approves the singer, we're supposed to say, oh, thanks, Mick. We'll just accept it's Foreigner. Okay, we accepted Kelly Hansen. He earned his stripes. We all know, of course, Lou Gramm is the original, the greatest. But you can only push this so far to me before it becomes kind of a joke. And I don't care if Mick Jones approved it. We took that once on our faith in rock and roll with Kelly Hansen. You can't really push this anymore. You could say the same thing with Journey, with Arnel Pineda. After enough of these personnel changes, after a long period of time, we're just stop it. Stop pretending. Retire. Go off gracefully into that good night. And stop trying to fool us just so you can make more money. Yes, we're getting this overarching theme of greed. I promise you I'm done with it. I'm done with it. Some other tour news. Some small, some big, some not even really rock and roll. But we'll start off with great news with the legal issues resolved. We're looking at a 2026 reunion tour for the Guess Who, featuring both Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings. Really the two main creative forces in the Guess Who. And they're putting out, now Randy Bachman is currently working on the resuscitated BTO. We'll talk more about them later. Bachman Turner Overdrive going out on tour in 2025. But they're saying they are going to play Springsteen-like shows here. We're talking 2.5, 3-hour shows. Every great, awesome hit from the Guess Who. So I got to tell you right now, I'm very, very intrigued in 2026 going to see this. Because the Guess Who is a band I got into a little bit later on in life. And I love them. So we will see. on the agenda on the Fortress of Rock for 2026, maybe. A review of the Guess Who Live. The Sex Pistols are coming to America. God save the Queen. Or God save Donald Trump, I don't know. The Sex Pistols have scheduled 13 dates in North America. September and October of 2025, of course, as has been the case, because he just seems kind of like a jerk and doesn't want to get along with anybody about anything. There will be no Johnny Rotten, aka John Lydon, performing at these shows. The Searchers. What? Who? What, Maestro? The Searchers. Long time. Long touring. Long performing UK pop rock band. They have been together since 1959. Some will dispute that. Some will say you could go all the way back to, I believe, 1957 to really find the beginnings of the Searchers. The Searchers will play their final show ever at the Glastonbury Festival overseas on June the 27th. Now, you kids should know by now, we do dabble in other forms of music here on the Fortress of Rock. I will lean into disco, some funk, some R&B. Never rap. Definitely country, especially old school country. And I love my Lounge Lizards. I love the Rat Pack. Anybody who would sit in a smoky Vegas showroom belting out these subtly intense songs. Johnny Mathis, I believe, would be included in that. The great Johnny Mathis, unfortunately, due to health issues, most notably due to rapid memory loss, Johnny Mathis has had to call it quits. He does have a few shows left. He is retiring from touring in May of 2025. He is 89 years old, so you can definitely understand this. And I'm just worried that hopefully he still can enjoy life for a few years. And this isn't going to be one of those things where he's done with performing and then things go downhill immediately. But the great Johnny Mathis, of course, his signature song, Chances Are, is going to be done with concerts, live performing, touring, coming up here in May. A guy who said he was done with touring and concerts. I guess he never really said he was done with concerts, but he's a quirky fella, and that is David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth has scheduled his second show, his second concert for 2025. Of course, we talked a few months ago. By now, I think it's been a few months since we talked about, I believe, the M3 Festival, where he's going to be one of the headliners out there, along with, of course, Stephen Pearcy and Warren DeMartini of Rat. So, David Lee Roth, if this surprises you, if this shocks you, forget it. You're fooling yourself. Okay? David Lee Roth is going to go kicking and screaming before he goes quietly. Yeah, of course, that M3 Festival I mentioned is May the 2nd, 3rd, and the 4th. Like I mentioned, he is going to be one of the headliners. We talked about it last week because Winger is going to be playing at the M3 Festival. Just blown away by last week's news from Kip Winger about the fact that band is pretty much winding it down and going to be winding it down quickly. Great, an assortment of great artists. Sebastian Bach, Ace Frehley as well, going to be there at the M3. But David Lee Roth, if you're out in California, and this seems to be a growing trend. I've noticed that here in the upper Midwest recently, where a lot of performers are playing wineries, vineyards. David Lee Roth, the second show he's got scheduled for 2025 is at the Mountain Winery in Saratoga, California on September the 12th. Now again, being the cynical person that I am, I've looked into some of these shows at wineries and vineyards up in Michigan, because there's a lot of them up there. And Ted Nugent's playing one, and Cheap Trick and Collective Soul are playing one. It's another money grab. Tickets are more expensive than they need to be. These wineries are not set up for concerts, so it looks, in some cases, like you're looking at terrible sight lines, awful seating, unless, of course, you're very bougie and can afford $400, $500 to reserve an entire table. This is, again, where rock and roll is going, and I don't like it. Where music in general is going. All right, on to other news when it comes to music. We've been talking a lot here over the past year or two about documentaries and biopics, so we've got some news on that front. Zendaya, very big star, especially among the younger crowd. She's been in the Spider-Man movies. She's in the Dune movies. Doesn't really do much for me, but, I have my opinion just like you do. Zendaya will star as Ronnie Spector in the biopic coming from A24. A24, of course, lately has really become a hot commodity in terms of being a studio that's on the cutting edge in Hollywood. So, Be My Baby from A24, starring Zendaya, is now in development. And I've told you, just like we saw with Marvel Studios almost 2 decades ago, where they said, oh, we can make movies about all of these comic book heroes that nobody's ever done before. They found this treasure trove of stories, interesting, fascinating stories. This is what we're seeing now with rock and roll and music. All of these stories, these classic rock and roll and music artists are now getting made. Some good, some bad. So we will see, I would imagine, with Zendaya involved, this is pretty much a high-profile project. Once again, Be My Baby, coming from A24 Studios, starring Zendaya as Ronnie Spector. Now, in terms of documentaries, which can be hit and miss as well, this one, though, I am all in on. It's coming this summer. We don't have a specific date yet, but HBO will be presenting a 2-part documentary called And So It Goes, about the life of Billy Joel. I cannot wait for this. I have always been a Billy Joel fan. Always. Going all the way back to the 70s. And I'm sure if they do it right, we've had this discussion on the Fortress of Rock in the past, if they do it right. Is this going to be one of those sugar-coated, candy-coated, Billy Joel never did anything really wrong type of documentaries like we saw with Bon Jovi, like we talked about recently, the problems with Netflix canceling their Prince documentary because it was going to be too negative? There's always going to be negative. We're human beings. We're fallible. We all have great traits and we all have bad traits. Some people have a lot more good than bad, and then you've got vice versa. So it'll be interesting to see how this Billy Joel documentary comes across. Will they sugarcoat it? Will we get a little bit of the truth? I don't want to say dirt, but a little bit of the truth behind the life of Billy Joel. I do have a feeling either way it's going to be fascinating. So that's something to look forward to this summer. And then finally, in news of the world, you guys know I am a huge, massive Triumph fan. The Canadian power trio. I still think Allied Forces, arguably, one of the greatest albums ever. Despite what the snobs at Rolling Stone think. As I know they've degraded it, and I know they think it's one of the worst albums ever made. But that's fine. That's why I hate critics. Everybody's got their opinion. Nobody's opinion is worth more than anybody else's. I'm sorry, it's not. Your opinion about an album means as much as mine, means as much as one of those morons at Rolling Stone. There is a Triumph tribute album coming out. It is called Magic Power, of course. It is out June the 6th here in 2025. And it's got a pretty heavy-duty lineup. Sebastian Bach, Jack Blades of Night Ranger, Dee Snider, of course, of Twisted Sister, Jeff Keith, lead singer of Tesla, Joey Belladonna, lead singer of Anthrax, among others, Slash, I can't confirm it, Slash is somewhere on this album. Not sure what tracks he's playing guitar on. And then Nancy Wilson, guitarist for Heart, does a song as well. And I'm sure she's happy because Triumph is Canadian and she hates America, even though she's from Seattle. So I guess that's really the only reason why she's doing this, is because it's paying tribute to a Canadian band and not an American band. Or a band from Britain, because of course we all know how much the Wilson sisters love Led Zeppelin. But again, Nancy Wilson hates America. One would ask, then why don't you move? But that's a discussion for another day. And on that awkward and bizarre note, we will move on to segment 2 here on the Fortress of Rock on March the 28th, 2025. It's time for Breakdown, where we look at the best in new music, albums, songs, and concert reviews. Got a couple new songs for you this week, and then we are going to put Doc Brown to work. A little bit of overtime for Doc Brown. We're going to do another classic album review. We did this a few weeks back. We started it. We're going to do it on occasion when we need to. We're going to pick albums that flew under the radar. We're not picking albums where you know 2/3 of the songs. We're going to pick albums from the classic rock era that you and I maybe haven't listened to enough. And we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But first, the two new songs we're going to review. First up is Bryan Adams. This is the second single off of his upcoming album, Roll with the Punches. I still have not heard a definitive release date for this album yet. But the second single, the second release is out, is called Make Up Your Mind. It's got a solid, catchy guitar riff, and that shouldn't shock anybody, as long as he stays away from the sappy, maudlin ballads. Bryan Adams is one of the most dependable guys out there, performers out there, when it comes to putting out really good, catchy rock songs. And to a point, Make Up Your Mind is no different. There's something about this one, as opposed to the title track, the first single, Roll with the Punches, just had a little, this is going to sound like an absolutely ridiculous cliche, but Roll with the Punches had a little more pop, a little more force behind it. Just like a good punch. Get it? Had a little bit more to it. Make Up Your Mind sounds, in the 80s, this would have been a big hit. Okay? Because back in the 80s, this album would have been welcomed with open arms, would have sold 500,000 to 1 million copies its first week out, and would have had 4 or 5 hit songs. And Make Up Your Mind would have been one of them. Now, would it have been a massive monster hit? No. And now in this day and age, kind of sounds a little stale. There's really nothing new here. And that would be fine if it had, again, a little bit more energy behind it. This sounds like a song that Bryan Adams could have come up with in his sleep, performed in his sleep, sang in his sleep. The lyrics are, Bryan Adams has never been one for deep and meaningful lyrics. He's most well known for putting together the whole package. He can take basic, generic lyrics, wrap them up in a great package of solid guitars, solid production. This one just falls a little tiny bit short for me, especially as the second single. The assumption would be the second single is the second best song on the album. I would hope this is not the second best song on Roll with the Punches. So unfortunately, it's kind of close, sort of close, but I cannot recommend Make Up Your Mind by Bryan Adams. It's not terrible. While I won't encourage it, feel free to go out, check it out, see what you think. If you're a Bryan Adams fan, you will probably tolerate it more than others. And you can say that about any band or performer, right? This is going to lead us into our second song. I could pretty much say the same thing about L.A. Guns. And the second release from their upcoming album, Leopard Skin. I cannot say the title because it involves a curse word. And as you all know, even though In my personal life, I am more than happy to let an F-bomb fly when needed, maybe sometimes when not needed. I don't want to do it here on this podcast because I want this to be accessible and available to everybody, young and old, so we keep rock and roll alive. Everybody needs to listen to the Fortress of Rock, listen to the news, listen to the reviews, listen to the past and the future. So the second release from Leopard Skin is Lucky MFer. It's about the best I can do. And I can't believe I saw it today. There's actually a radio version of this. They found a way to somehow edit it, taking the curse word out, the F-bomb out, and actually did a halfway decent job of doing it without completely destroying the song. And you know what I'm talking about. If any of you have heard old Green Day songs from Dookie on the radio and how they just mangle them because they have to take out all the curse words. And I'm sure there's plenty of rap songs out there, same thing. But the first single, Taste It, was a little bit different, a little bit sludgy, a little bit slimy, and I liked it. This one, you can definitely hear the connection to Guns N' Roses. That's an obvious connection, of course, considering the fact that Tracy Guns and Axl Rose almost went forward together with Guns N' Roses. Of course, Tracy Guns backed out, saw that that was going to be a mess in terms of overindulgence, drug use, and all that, the rock and roll excess. So he went with his own band, an offshoot, that was L.A. Guns. Both bands still around today. But Lucky MFer, really, you could hear Axl Rose singing parts of this song. It seems like it was almost written in part for Axl. So that's why even after all these decades apart, there's still that connection between Tracy Guns and Axl Rose and L.A. Guns and Guns N' Roses. Because Lucky MFer sounds like this, it could have been a Guns N' Roses song. It could have been a leftover studio outtake from Appetite for Destruction. So just like with Taste It, I will give this a modest recommendation. If you're in the mood for some sleazy, nasty, Sunset Strip rock and roll. Shocking, note sarcasm, that would come from L.A. Guns. So I'm guarded in my optimism for Leopard Skin, which of course we'll be reviewing here in a few weeks on the Fortress of Rock. We'll see what the rest of the album feels like and how it fits in with these first two singles. The sequencing is going to be very interesting to me, where they put Taste It, where they put Lucky MFer, and what is around these two songs. So, Bryan Adams is a near miss this week with Make Up Your Mind. L.A. Guns is a tepid recommendation with Lucky MFer. And that will lead us into, wait, I have to go out to the garage. I have to go out to the rock and roll DeLorean. Doc Brown, what are you doing out here? What are you do? Let's go. We're going early. We're going now. Even though we're not done with breakdown yet. We're hopping into the rock and roll DeLorean. Doc Brown's going to get it up to 1.21 gigawatts. We're heading out to the rock and roll time stream. We're going to go back in time for a classic album review. But again, when we do these reviews, something that we just started, I'm not going to review Back in Black. I'm not going to review 1984 or Blizzard of Oz or anything like that. The albums that we know and love. I'm going to dig deeper and find albums that we really overlooked, maybe for some legitimate reasons. Albums that maybe sold okay, but really didn't leave a huge impact as time passed. What we have for you this week. A band that I mentioned earlier, the Guess Who. The Guess Who was a band that I got into we're 2025, maybe 10 years ago. Maybe 2015, maybe a couple years before that. But very close. I really only got into the Guess Who 10 to 12 years ago. They were before my time, since I really didn't start to get into music until the mid-70s. The Guess Who was pretty much done by then. I heard on classic rock radio some of their stuff occasionally. Another band, now we're going to the 80s here. Another band that I really didn't get into at the time. And you're talking about a hair metal aficionado here with me, the Maestro. There were bands that fell between the spaces, fell into the cracks. Dangerous Toys I never really got into. I listened to the one album from Enough's Enough, and that was about it. Trickster wasn't really my thing. And I still haven't really gotten back into those bands. But one that I did rediscover, again, we're talking about 10 to 12 years ago. This is kind of when I had a reawakening when it came to music. This is when I got tired of waiting for bands to put out new music, and I decided, let's go back in time, let's dig through the vaults, the old stuff, and let's find some albums, some bands that we really never got into, and that will be our quote-unquote new music. Just happened to coincide with my divorce, but oops, I didn't want to mention that out loud. So this week, Y&T. Y&T, very interesting, underrated band. Never really hit it big. Never had a massive hit album. They did have one or two songs on the radio. Summertime Girls comes to mind. Now, what I was doing here was I wanted to pick, because they never had a huge hit album. Initially, I was going to pick their highest charting album on the Billboard album charts, which would have been In Rock We Trust. Now, that featured Lipstick and Leather. I know that song. I was trying to avoid an album where I knew 3 or 4 or 5 songs. So I thought I could still kind of get away with reviewing In Rock We Trust. Unfortunately, it looks like there are contractual issues still to this day in 2025 between Y&T and their old record label, A&M Records, because I could not find any of their old A&M records, their albums, on streaming. So I had to make a last minute adjustment here. So what I am going to review is their first album after they left A&M. They moved over to Geffen Records. Very significant move. Very big label. Geffen Records, of course. So the first album Y&T did for Geffen Records was Contagious. And that's what we're going to be reviewing here this week as we head into the rock and roll time stream. And the good news is, I really didn't know this album at all. Didn't really remember any of the songs being played on the radio, like a lot of the big hits from their A&M years. So 10 tracks, Y&T's Contagious. I'm not gonna go really deep in depth here, but I'm gonna give you a little interesting backstory. So they switch labels. Y&T switches from A&M, where they had really their big run. Not a lot of commercial success. Again, keep that in mind. So even to this day, it's obvious they had issues with A&M Records. They can't get their stuff even here in 2025 on streaming. So they switched in the latter part of the 80s to Geffen. Now, it's obvious to me, and from what research I did, that Geffen really decided to take control of this band. They polished them up in terms of production, in terms of their engineering, the sound, and you could almost, I did this, you could almost classify every song on Contagious as a song that would have been better suited for another 80s hair metal or rock band. Now, the best song on the album by far is the title track, the first song, Contagious. Very catchy, very cool. But you can hear it right off the bat. Their personality, Y&T's personality, has just been sucked out of all of this. None of these songs sound like Y&T. They don't sound like Lipstick and Leather, Summertime Girls, Black Tiger. All of that is gone. Now they almost sound like a band performing songs get well suited for other bands. So Contagious, very catchy, very cool song, but you can tell it sounds like Bon Jovi. Good Bon Jovi, very, very good Bon Jovi, but nonetheless Bon Jovi. Then the second track is L.A. Rocks. One of the better songs on the album as well. Obviously, an 80s era Kiss song. I could definitely hear Kiss performing this. So we're 2 songs in, everything's good, despite the fact that Y&T is sounding like anybody else but Y&T. It's still good. Then the bottom drops out on track 3. Track 3, Temptation, is awful. I mean awful. It's embarrassingly bad. Again, it's overproduced. The background vocals, especially throughout this album, are just generic, pathetic, awful. So I'll let you take your pick here. This could be the Scorpions because of the dual guitars, or a sappy Def Leppard ballad. easily, far and away, the worst song on the album. Track 4, The Kid Goes Crazy, is not bad. Not bad. This is definitely Sammy Hagar era Van Halen. And it's not even close. It's obvious. Dave Meniketti's delivery on this sounds so eerily similar to Sammy Hagar. It's ridiculous. It's not even close. I mean, it's not even close in that there's no dispute that he's trying to sound like Sammy Hagar. Track 5 is Fight for Your Life. Again, okay. Not terrible. Sounds to me like this could have been a good song for Dokken. Track 6, Armed and Dangerous, to me sounded like Quiet Riot. Again, not terrible. And you're going to find, I'm pretty much, my take on the rest of these songs on this album are about the same. You can listen to them. They're not offensively dumb. They're not bad. They're catchy. But, again, it's not Y&T. Track 7 gets a little bit better. We get back to the more solid quality level that we got with the first couple songs, Contagious and L.A. Rocks. Track 7 is Rhythm or Not. I really like this. This reminded me a little bit of Rat. Track 8, Bodily Harm. To me, this was really scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to mid-tempo rockers. A little bit more generic than maybe the rest of these kind of generic songs. And this one was even more generic. And unfortunately, it reminded me of Night Ranger at their worst. And I love Night Ranger. So this would be one of the worst Night Ranger songs ever, let's put it that way. But it reminded me somehow a little bit of Night Ranger. And then track 9, the last track with vocals, is Eyes of a Stranger, which is better. Gets back up to that decent quality level. But that reminded me, Eyes of a Stranger reminded me of Winger. So you can see how this album, again, if you want to be generous, you could say it's a tribute to all of Y&T's peers, in that you can hear in every song a different band from the 80s leaking through, leaking in. But I would think that it's more because Geffen was being overbearing, Geffen Records, overbearing in terms of telling Y&T, we're going to bring you on, and we're going to give you this nice, shiny contract with one of the hot record labels, but you're going to have to do things our way, not your way. And then the album closes out with a really, a worthless instrumental called I'll Cry For You. If you're going to put an instrumental on your album, it better be standout. It better be significant. It better be Eruption. Of course would go there because I'm a huge Van Halen fan. But go back to Night Ranger. Night Ranger doesn't put instrumentals on their albums. Why? That's not what they do. They don't have Eddie Van Halen. They don't have Yngwie Malmsteen. They don't have that kind of guitarist who's going to be able to carry a 2 or 3 minute instrumental and make it interesting and make it different and make it add some flavor and texture to the album. So I don't understand what I'll Cry For You is supposed to add to Contagious. So unfortunately, Contagious ends on a really dumb note. This is just a bad misstep to put this inconsequential instrumental track at the end. However, I will say this, because I am a generous soul, and I do have a soft spot in my heart for Y&T. I still think this album, at the barest level, works. It is like watching the dumbest guilty pleasure movie you can think of. A movie that most other people, maybe your close friends are with you because that's why you're close friends. You have similar tastes. But other people outside your little close circle of friends would watch this movie and they would say, what do you even think is redeeming about this film? Oh, well, I liked it. My buddy likes it. My girlfriend likes it. That's all that matters. You have movies and you have CDs and albums like that. So do I. The Hollywood Nights comes to mind. I'm not sure how many of you out there have seen it. And I'm probably even underestimating its appeal. I know a lot of people out there like it. But that's what Contagious is in terms of a rock album. If you stash it in your car and you still have a CD player or a cassette player, and you throw it in, you're not going to be disappointed in the result as you're driving down the road. You're going to be fine with it. It's going to be still going to be better. Here's a good final take on this. It's still going to be better than almost anything you hear on the radio. How about that? So, with the barest of recommendations, I say travel back in time with Doc Brown and I. Listen to Y&T's Contagious. Now, as I said, I would have preferred to dig into their A&M catalog, which I could not, at least on streaming. If you have access to that, have at it. You're probably better off. So now, since we're out in the Rock and Roll DeLorean, a nice quick segue into segment 3 here, which of course is I Want to Go Back. That is our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money, where we look back. Now, we just look back at a classic album from the 80s. Now we look back at classic moments in rock and roll history, anniversaries of legendary albums. We got birthdays, all that good stuff coming up in just a few minutes. But now is the time, even though we're up to speed, had to get up to speed, 1.21 gigawatts, so we could review Y&T's Contagious. Still got to take care of business. Still got to take care of some business here on the Fortress of Rock. So, of course, you have found us somewhere. And, of course, I am eternally grateful for that. But you have options and choices. As your friend, as your brother from another mother, I am trying to help you out. If you don't like your current podcast platform, the Fortress of Rock is available in many other places. Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, Audible, and Good Pods. And I'm not promising anything, but I have been badgered over the past month by people trying to help me out, saying, get on YouTube. And I get it. I would love to be able to transition over to YouTube. I've been involved with YouTube in the past in another project, but now they have made it so difficult. You basically have to chop off one of your limbs and mail it to them in order to get approved to get on YouTube. So I'm working on it. Hopefully, here within the next month or so, we will be available on YouTube. Not video. We're not going to do a video podcast. It'll still be only my mellifluous voice with the Fortress of Rock logo, so to speak, out there on a YouTube page. But we're working on it. If I can figure out a way to do it without having to sign away my house and my life and my identity, then I will do it. So I'll keep you updated on that. And then, of course, don't forget the Facebook page. Fun stuff every weekend on the Fortress of Rock Facebook page. The Weekend Rock Project drops every Friday night, right around the same time as the brand new episode. The podcast episode of the Fortress of Rock drops. It's out there right now. We're looking for your greatest, your best rock songs. We're going to talk about life and how life is a balance between the normal and the strange. So we're looking for basically your best songs involving normal, typical, strange, weird, different, anything like that. Check out the Facebook page. I've got a little bit better explanation of it out there right now for you to check out and participate in. So again, normal, strange, songs with those words or associated words in the title. And then every Sunday, of course, is New Music Sunday. We got to keep new music alive. We got to keep these artists, performers kicking out new jams, as the kids would say. So by doing New Music Sunday, I'm trying to encourage them in my small way. Promoting one song every Sunday, one new song from a classic rock artist every Sunday. Not sure yet what this Sunday's song is going to be, but there will be one by mid-afternoon every Sunday on the Fortress of Rock Facebook page. And then also, I do a lot of research for this podcast. I have fun doing it. I tell you, almost every week I learn something new that I did not know before. 3 main sources for the stories here, especially the topics that we discuss in segment 1 and here in segment 3. UltimateClassicRock.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and the Van Halen Newsdesk.com. All right, so let us move into birthdays and anniversaries for March the 28th. We'll start off with anniversaries here. March the 28th, 2005. U2 began their massive Vertigo tour on this day, back in 2005, in San Diego, California. On this day, March the 28th, 1995, Skid Row released the vastly underappreciated Subhuman Race album. And I am a huge, massive Skid Row fan. And it's sad that they broke up when they did. really only three, but three massively awesome, creative, rocking albums to their credit. Of course, self-titled debut, Slave to the Grind, Subhuman Race. All three albums. Very different albums, really. But they're just all three phenomenal in their own way. But the third and final studio album from the classic lineup, I should put that out there as a caveat. We're not talking about the albums that Skid Row has put out with Snake Sabo and Rachel Bolan and their constantly changing lineup of lead singers. Now that Sebastian Bach has gone away, we're talking about the classic lineup with Sebastian Bach. Only 3 studio albums of original new material. And Subhuman Race, for some reason, always seems to get overlooked, and that is a travesty, because it is a unbelievable album. And it was released on this day in 1995. On this day, March the 28th, 1981, Blondie's Rapture was the #1 song in the United States. On this day, March the 28th, 1976, Genesis begins their first North American tour without Peter Gabriel. Technically started in Buffalo. That was the first U.S. date. On this day, March the 28th, 1975, an interesting little story. Now, I'm not going to say this is the first time I heard this, but if I have heard this before, I needed a refresher. I needed a little more detail, a little more confirmation. Supposedly on this day, March the 28th, in 1975, backstage at the Las Vegas Hilton, Barbra Streisand approached Elvis Presley after one of his shows and offered him the male lead in her remake of A Star is Born. Now, the story goes that Colonel Tom Parker, of course Elvis's manager, demanded way too much money, wanted Elvis to get top billing. The egos. Can you believe the egos between Barbra Streisand and Elvis Presley? Now, to me, I don't think it's asking too much for Elvis to get top billing. But, of course, Babs would never have any of that. So it all fell through, and then, of course, eventually Chris Christopherson ended up getting the male lead in the 70s version of A Star is Born. Wouldn't that have been interesting, though, in an alternate universe? Barbra Streisand and Elvis Presley starring in A Star is Born. Wow, that would have been something. And then finally, in anniversaries. On this day, March the 28th, 1973, Led Zeppelin releases Houses of the Holy. So now we move on to birthdays here for March the 28th. We just talked about A Star is Born. And there have been a few different successful incarnations of that classic tale of rags to riches and riches to rags. Of course, in the world of music, Born on This Day. Boy, this makes me feel old beyond belief, because I was already halfway through college. March the 28th, 1986. Lady Gaga was born. Wow. Man, I'm old. But, of course, she starred in the most recent, very successful version of A Star is Born on screen with Bradley Cooper. Born on this day, March the 28th, 1976. Dave Koenig, guitarist for The Killers. Born on this day, March the 28th, 1965. Steve Turner, guitarist for Mudhoney. Mudhoney, of course, one of those bands that doesn't get enough credit for what they did in terms of being part of the roots, the guts, the soul of what became the grunge era, the Seattle sound. Mudhoney was very, very important. And one wonders if you would have had Soundgarden or Pearl Jam or even Nirvana without Mudhoney. Born on this day, March the 28th, 1962. Ged Grimes was born. He is currently the bassist in Simple Minds. Born on this day, March the 28th, 1954, another one that's going to make me feel really old. Now, the reason why this makes me feel old, and probably will make a lot of you feel old, is because of how she still looks. She's one of these women, one of these performers that just doesn't seem to age. Now, I'm not saying anything about plastic surgery or anything like that. You could say that about Meg Ryan. You could say that about Courtney Cox. All I know is for somebody who is 70, now turning 71 today, if my math serves, I do believe that is correct, because she was born March the 28th, 1954. Reba McEntire, country music legend. She does not look 71 years old to me. And again, I'm stressing, I am not saying anything about cosmetic surgery or anything like that. She's always kind of looked like a little elf, a little pixie. Can't help but love Reba McEntire. Again, born on this day in, God help me, 1954. Born on this day, March the 28th, 1948. John Evan played keyboards for Jethro Tull through really their most popular, lucrative era, 1970 to 1980. Born on this day, March the 28th, 1948 as well. Milan Williams, keyboardist, guitar player for a band that I loved growing up in the 70s. Again, lots of different musical influences. Don't listen to my daughter. I'm not a music snob. Milan Williams played keyboards and guitar for the Commodores. And then finally, born on this day, March the 28th, 1945, Chuck Ports, the original bass player for the Turtles. All right, so Doc Brown, after his extra overtime duty, finally gets to turn the rock and roll DeLorean back around, get us into the garage here at the Fortress of Rock. We're going to pull the drawbridge up over the moat, start shutting things down, maybe get ready to watch some college basketball here on Friday night, March the 28th. But we're not done with this podcast yet. As I saunter back into the Fortress of Rock studio, we've got one final segment left. We just looked at the past. First two segments looked at present day rock and roll. Now we look to the future in segment 4, wrap it up, our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Now, you know, if you've been listening the last couple weeks, I've been trying to get back into being a little more structured in terms of week by week coming up what we're going to have for you. And we're not deviating from that to a point, somewhat. I'm cheating next week. I am cheating next week. I am letting you know right now. Honey, I'm stepping out on you. I'm cheating. We don't normally review live albums or greatest hits albums or expanded reissue packages, anything like that. I have been known to make exceptions when it comes to certain bands, certain projects, and of course, the one band above all others that would qualify for an exception to the rule is Van Halen. So next week, finally, thank goodness they made this decision. They followed through on it. I'm very appreciative. Warner Records, Rhino Records. You've got to give the true blue diehard fans a break when it comes to their wallets, when it comes to their purses, their pocketbooks. Now, when they put out last year the expanded, remastered edition of For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, they added in a bonus disc featuring the live concert that Van Halen put on in Dallas, Texas in 1991. Story behind it, of course, Sammy Hagar shot his mouth off because his voice was shot at an earlier Texas concert, promised they would come back for free. And this is what we got. Now, I'll save a lot of the details for next week because I am reviewing Van Halen Live in Dallas, 1991, out on its own, vinyl and CD. It's out now, kids. You don't have to buy For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge again. This is a very, very smart move on the part of the band, the record label. You're still getting your fans money, but you're not gouging them by making them buy this in addition to an album that they already own. So next week, episode 190 of the Fortress of Rock on April 4th, 2025, Van Halen Live in Dallas, 1991. In 2 weeks, the new album from L.A. Guns. We just reviewed Lucky M.F.er earlier. In 2 weeks, we will review the full album, Leopard Skin, by L.A. Guns, episode 191, April the 11th, 2025. Then the next few weeks, the next 3 weeks, next 4 weeks, I know what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be reviewing. I just haven't firmed up the order. So once we get past Leopard Skin in 2 weeks, we've got the new album from Craig Finn coming out on 4/4, April the 4th. That, of course, Craig Finn is the lead singer, the frontman for the Hold Steady. At some point, we'll review that album. The new Spin Doctors album, Face Full of Cake, is out April the 11th. We will review that. I did get my hands on, and we're going to make another exception to the rule. I finally got my hands on Dirty Honey's new live album. And that, of course, would be Mayhem and Revelry live. So that's coming up at some point. That'll be a fill-in. And then we've got Billy Idol's new album coming out on April the 25th. Now that's a ways down the road. But we will definitely review Billy Idol's new album. That will probably be the beginning of May. So again, next week Van Halen. In 2 weeks, L.A. Guns. And then after that, in some order, Craig Finn, Spin Doctors, Dirty Honey, Billy Idol. Somehow, some way, we will review all of those for you in the coming 6 weeks on the Fortress of Rock. In terms of new songs, which of course we will fit in here in the coming weeks, I mentioned, these are the ones that I've mentioned in the past that we're still trying to slot in when we can. David Lee Roth. Brand new song he's got posted on YouTube called Alligator Pants. That would be maybe very appropriate for next week to pair with Van Halen. Another interesting pairing for next week could be the band D-Raps. Now, I've mentioned them in the past. I don't expect you guys to really know who they are, but they sound at times eerily similar to classic era Van Halen, especially David Lee Roth era Van Halen. They now have two songs out off their upcoming album Viva Rock and Roll. Last Fall, now we have mentioned that in the past, and that one does sound, that has echoes of Van Halen in it. Now, the second single, Setting Sun, just came out. That one's a little different. So maybe they're finally trying to break away, pull away from these Van Halen comparisons. So we've got two songs potentially next week from D-Raps, Last Fall and Setting Sun. Second single from Craig Finn's album, of course, I've mentioned we're going to review the full album, but that's probably a month away. So the second single is Bethany. Might have a review for you on that in the next week or two before the full album review hits. Now, new stuff. Those songs I've mentioned for the most part in the past few episodes. This stuff is new. Just this week, just found out about this. Now we got the third single from the Spin Doctors' Face Full of Cake album. The third single out now is The Heart of the Highway. So, if we can get it in before the full album review, we're going to try to do it. The Heart of the Highway by Spin Doctors. Hopefully have a review of that for you in the next week or two. Bachman Turner Overdrive. We talked in segment 1 about Randy Bachman and how he's getting back together with Burton Cummings, and they're planning on the 2026 Guess Who reunion tour, but in 2025, Randy Bachman's focus is on resuscitating BTO. And they have released a new song called 60 Years Later. 60 Years Ago. And this is a tribute to Canada and the area where they grew up, where they formed. So, once again, Bachman Turner Overdrive, BTO, 60 years ago. we'll give that a listen or two, and we will hopefully have a review of that for you soon here on the Fortress of Rock. And then finally, I saved the best for last. This email snuck into my inbox yesterday. Coming out April the 1st. One of my favorite bands. And they don't put out new music very often. But when they do, it is great and it is glorious. I have been notified by the Hives that they have a new song coming out. The Hives, Enough is Enough, is dropping April the 1st. And you know that will definitely be a featured review here on the Fortress of Rock. The Hives are awesome. I can't express my excitement. New music from the Hives. The Hives never, ever, ever let me down. So that leaves us with our countdown, our tribute, our charts. Tribute to the old school Billboard charts of the 60s, 70s, and 80s into the early 90s before the SoundScan mess and then their awful repeated attempts to work streaming in and just botching everything completely and totally. So the Fortress of Rock, we took it on our own to create the new, true chart for what you should be listening to. What's the most popular here on the Fortress of Rock each and every week. Your number one album here on March the 28th, 2025 is Van Halen, live in Dallas, 1991. I got it a day early, at least from what I could tell. So I had an extra day to listen to it before the podcast. I don't care if it's all classic rock, old stuff that we've heard before. It's still great and glorious. So, your number one album this week on the Fortress of Rock charts is Van Halen, live in Dallas, 1991. Your top songs. Going hard and heavy here for the third week in a row. Still loving Black Label Society's Lord Humongous. And then that is joined by, because I always choose two songs, because once again, honey, I'm stepping out on you, I'm cheating. Just enough, just liked it enough for it to tie with Black Label Society for top song of the week. L.A. Guns, Lucky MFer. So once again, top album, Van Halen, live in Dallas, 1991. Top songs, L.A. Guns, Lucky MFer, and Black Label Society's Lord Humongous. And that is going to do it for the Fortress of Rock for March the 28th, 2025. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Smoke them if you got them. Don't really. Sorry. It's kind of a disgusting habit to me. It doesn't matter what you're smoking. Smoking just, ugh. Sorry. Pop a cold one. How about that? I'll condone that. Pop a cold one with your loved ones. Love the ones you're with. Once again, I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. I am the Ayatollah of rock and roll. I love all of you for listening each and every Friday night. Keep it up. Let's keep rock and roll alive. We'll do it again in 7 days. But until then, peace out.